Hello everyone, good day to you all ladies and gentlemen. What a pleasure here to stand here right before you to deliver my speech. My name is Mera. I stand as the Prime Minister from the Opposition House, and I just want to say thank you to you all audiences, judges and also others for allowing me to state my statements. So without further ado, let's begin to reply to your speech. For the context, the motion to debate is this House would require political candidates to pass a political competency test in order to run for office. And I also want to appreciate the opponent's statement and thoughts of how government should do in order to run for office, the pros and cons, and also I understood the case clearly. But one point that the opponent's house is missing is, does passing a political competency test prove your worth in running for the office? So let's discuss this. Therefore, I agree that this test would objectively prove the quality of a politician, but one thing to be clear is you didn't explain what the test is all about. It could be a writing exam, it could be a racing game, you call it. I do agree that every political candidate should be tested for their competence, but the way you define political competency test isn't very crystal clear in my opinion. You mentioned that they must have a specific and relatable background in healthcare, law, industry, etc., which is a hard thing to get its experience with, especially if you want it to be a professionally. For the law and industry background, yes, many politicians does have a law and industry background. Meanwhile, healthcare, I think you do not need or required to be a medical professional to run for the office. Opponent must specifically tell which sector in office to run for instead, because what the opponent explained is run for the office like whole of it, which rather makes the argument isn't specific enough to debate. Nevertheless, if the competency test is something like a degree to submit, so in my opinion, it's not a very ideal solution. And if opponents try to find a candidate who has the knowledge to be able to run a functional society, does not need any relatable background with the people, they do not need any of those tests. And why is that? Then I will explain this in my argument. The opponent also stated that opponent want to stabilize the Politicians Act with a certain mechanism of accountability with the competency test. If the plan worked, I could also see the image of the outcome. But realistically, providing a competency test won't stabilize the Politicians Act. The only reason is the media. One word, the media. A politician could just cheat or bribe their way on the test, then a media would highlight it like you said before. It will bring a new problem into the society instead, since after people saw the result, they trust the politician even more, and that plan would also backlash it and also backfire at the citizens. And one thing I want to underline is that there is no parameter in the test. Opponents should also define competency. Is it about something like they being active in society, has running around society for years in the office maybe, or maybe in any other possible definition that you might have said before. An opponent should also define minimum level of public office so that we could subject them to competency qualification and requirement and even bare minimum, which would increase efficiency while also prohibiting underqualified people to run for office. And again, determine what is the test. Is it something like a degree in particular study? Is it a material to submit? While most countries usually only requiring people to at least having a law degree. So to do this, opponents should define the parameter before jumping to add the test instead. From the law side, usually people who has any degree or even not in any country, a natural born citizen was older than the age minimum, has never elected more than 2 periods, are qualified enough to be a president. I repeat, president. There is no indication to run for the president, but there are unwritten rules. Citizen isn't that easy to fool, and obviously they could judge the candidates based on anything, basically anything, even the media, especially the media. A test is just one of many ways to judge them instead. Do you think it will work on them? Ladies and gentlemen, leaving those obscurity aside, it is a right thing to verify which candidate deserves to lead and run for office. And I understand that political fields are unhealthy. Yes, I do understand. I do see it myself, which makes the problem isn't about how should one prove that they are qualified to run for office. but it's about how to make those politicians stay truthfully and competent in their work field instead. Opponent has stated over and over again how broken is the political system, which I agree, which makes the problem is about how the system run, not the people who try to continue the system, since any candidate would follow any system that's currently running on their period. They are only following what the current people who run for the office are following, which pinpoints to the cause of the argument more into the broken system and not the election system, not about the social participation test. And because politicians candidates are proposed by a party, most people won't look at the candidates test results but at the party instead, which isn't ideal to do. And so let me rewind my point again. Opponent has a flaw in definition, argument details, and lack of foreseeing the negative side or cons, which is a crucial thing in this debate. And again, you do not stabilize the system, you do not stabilize how the politician act, because again, it's the same thing to do if the media highlighted the test result, which is bribed by certain politicians, uh, and it would again backfire and backlash it at the citizen instead. So it's not ideal again. It's not objectively built again. And therefore, again, I agree that this test would objectively prove the quality of a politician, but again, you do not see the negative side. One thing to be clear is, again, you didn't explain what the test is all about. And because it's just a writing test, most citizens only look at how the politician do what the politician is trying to show in their work. Again, this does not do anything to citizens, because again, a media could just highlight that good part and leaving those bad part aside. So again, yes, I do agree that every political candidate should be tested for their competence, but the way again you define the political competency isn't very crystal clear. And again, opponents should also define minimum level of public office, because again, so that we could subject them to competency qualification and requirement, or even bare minimum, which is a crucial thing in this debate. Again, I agree with the law side that yes, you do need a qualification, but if there is no bare minimum in your argument, then how do we define what is good and what is bad for qualification for the politicians who try to be elected? And again, let me rewind my point again. Opponent has have a flaw in definition, argument test, and lack of foreseeing the negative side or cons. But again, I think that's a wrap from me. That whole point is a wrap from me again. And thank you so much for listening, and peace for everyone.